Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have a review, or it's not really an unboxing because it doesn't have a box.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's old.
Did it exist?
It did exist, and this is the proof that it existed. I tell you what, let's stop playing around. Let's get to it. This is the Orion 620 GT 6-channel amplifier from back in the day. When I got into car audio, this was my brand of choice. This logo, this guy right here, this is what I wanted. I had this on my back window. It was huge and it looked so sexy. Orion back then made a bunch of really cool products. They had a couple amplifier lines. They had the red HECA series, like this one here. They had the black GX series. They had the SX series amplifiers. The 2125 was my first big amplifier. I still have this guy, the heatsink anyways, up in my attic. They made EQs and processors. The 600 EQM. This was, oh, I wish I still had this. It was so pretty. It was just knobs. It lit up. Oh, little logo right here. Back in the day, this is what we had. This was a sales guide that they handed out. You could just take this. You had this little guy here that had lights, and this was a system builder as well. It would tell you how to do a full active system, something we talk about a lot now. You have a 250, a 250, and a 250, tweeter, mid, subwoofers. They would just tease you with the allure of just building some amazing systems. And like, ooh, who would build this? I mean, you had 222s, 250s, 2125s, 4 of them. And then you come to this page here and they talk about how it worked and everything. And like the beast, oh yeah, the beast. Big system designs. This is something they just don't do anymore. And all of this was very, I mean, at the time, this was expensive. I mean, by today's standards, this is high-end stuff. And they knew that. And they were like, we need to be a little bit more affordable. So for those of you that are familiar with Orion, before they came out with Cobalt, which was their entry-level line, they came out with the GT series. And in the GT series, they had 3 amplifiers. They had a 220, a 420, and a 620. The 220 was obviously 2-channel, 4-channel was 4-channel, and then this guy, which was 6 channels of fun and excitement. Today, we're going to tell you all about the craziness that is the 620 GT. Let's start here on this end, where the wiring is. So for those of you that weren't around in the 80s and 90s, a lot of amplifiers had these things. They had these giant plugs on them, and the power wires just came out of the amplifier. Dude, this is a 10 gauge, right? Just 10 gauge. And then you'll notice down here, these RCAs. These look totally cheap. There's no question about it. They're not even standard colors. Yellow, black, white, and red definitely are, but they come out of the board. But it's a 6-channel. There's only 4 inputs here, which I'll let you in on a secret now, was the fault with this amplifier. But you gotta remember, back in the late 80s, early 90s, for one, CD players were just finally hitting the scene, and 6-channel preamp, that wasn't even a feature any of us talked about, because we had all those EQs and crossovers and things like that that would give us our outputs. We would only needed 1 output, and there was plenty of players out there that only had 1 output. Now the joy of this plug is that it is, well, for one, it's kind of a nightmare. You have a blue wire. Blue wire was the same, so this is remote turn on. But then you have weird colors: white, white, black, orange, orange, black, yellow, yellow, black, brown, brown, black, gray, gray, black, green, green, black. But you notice there's no purple, because purple, the standard white, gray, green, purple, wasn't on this. It didn't have that. Most Orion amps had yellow and orange, and then yellow, black, and orange, black, like this plug here. Looking at the other end of the amplifier, you have your woofer gain, your rear gain, your front gain, you have your low pass crossover, you have a band pass for the rear output, both low and high, and then you have a high pass. Now think about that for a minute. Back then, going full active, that was a normal thing. This amplifier, tweeter, mid-range, subwoofer, 3-way active. Amplifiers nowadays, bandpass? What the heck is that? Very few amplifiers have that now, but back then, this had one. But don't get too excited. Let me show you the bottom of this amp and you'll understand what I mean. Feast your eyes on this nightmare right here. Oh yeah. Now there is one manufacturer that still gives you this, and if you understand what this does, then this is great, because this allows you to plot your points through here and get the desired output you want. But it's understanding it and then going for what's underneath this guy here that does make things a tad bit interesting. So unlike cool switches on the amplifier, instead we had these guys. If you've ever installed a pack module, you'll notice these guys look familiar. We still use these. Like a Kicker Key has these on the side of the amplifier. Some of the new Alpine 450 has these on the side of the amplifier. So we've been using these for years, but not quite as crazy as they were using them for here. Looking at the inputs, we have input 1 is yellow, input 2 is white, 3 is red, 4 is black. Coming in, we see the gain stages located right here. As we said, it's 4 channels of input. There's a subwoofer input, but where's the gain stage? Well, it's located over here, which was the problem. Let me explain why. The first switch we run into is 2B and 3A. What these allow you to do is use just inputs yellow and white. If you flick both of these, then that is going to connect these input signals over here to red and black. That means we only have to use those 2 inputs to power all the inputs on the amplifier. So let's leave those off for what we're trying to do. If we want to bridge these, 1 and 2 were bridged and 3 and 4 were bridged, then we could use 1B and 3B. That would combine it so that we only had to hook up RCA red and yellow to feed these outputs, and then those would feed back into our gain here. As we're coming down the line, we see these dots. That means we go down and into this. Default, right out of the box, is subwoofer is going to be fed by yellow and white. Now, yellow and white are going to be our front or tweeter outputs. That is what's feeding our subwoofer channel. If we flick on 4B and 5B, what that does is that gives us what's called non-fader subwoofer, meaning we're going to feed in yellow and red to the input here, and we're going to feed in white and black to the input there. So that means we have a non-fading subwoofer. If we fade to front, we fade to rear, these is still going to get signal, but the signal is always going to be after these 2 gains. So if we turn this gain down, we turn this gain up, if we fade from front to rear, this is going to fluctuate. If we have it just connected default up to this, if we turn this down because we need to turn down the volume of the tweeters, then this gain is going to be lower too, because this gain can only be as high as the input allows. That was the big problem in this, because naturally you put it on the tweeter channel, and the tweeter is something you typically turn down, so you turn this gain down, and then voila, here you go, your subwoofer channel is not loud enough. Problem right there. Moving on, we'll come on to yellow channel. As you're moving across, if you go forward and you want to use the tweeter crossover, you turn on 1A. If you're using an external crossover, then you use 2A, because 2A will take you up here and allow you to bypass the crossover. The same is true on the white channel. Moving on to the red and black channel, if you go down the center and you don't hit any switches, turn on 7B, that'll give you just a high pass crossover if you're going to be using it for like a rear channel. If you come across here and you turn on 6B and 8B, then that's going to make it a low pass only. And if you come down the center and you just turn on 8B, then that is going to make it a band pass for a mid-range. You guys all following along with that? I hope so. Now coming down to the sub-channel, it's very similar to channels yellow and white in that you have a pass, which is 12B and 7A, or if you want the low pass crossover, you turn on 11B and 8A. They're not even on the same sides. Now since this amp was given to me a long time ago and I haven't used it since then, let's go inside here and we can kind of figure out what this was set up to do. The first dip switch that is on is 1A. This is A, this is B. So we'll come across over here to the side and we'll look for 1A. 1A is turning on the high pass crossover on yellow. So that means 6A should also be on, and it is. Next to that is 8A is on. So we'll come over here and we'll look for 8A. 8A is low pass channel. So that means 11B should be on, and 11B is on. Next is 11A. 11A is high pass only on channels red and black. So then that's going to tell me that 7B should be on, and 7B is on. So that's all for A. We also have B4. So we'll come over here. B4 is the non-fading input for the gain control. That's telling me that 5B should be on, and 5B is on. So what this amplifier was set up was for front, rear, and sub output only. It wasn't being used as a full active system. So even back then you could do full active and people still weren't doing that. I know, it's crazy. Who wouldn't do that? Well, none of these would be complete unless we took the bottom off of this and showed you what it looked like inside. All these had this warranty void sticker on them. That was Orion's way of saying like, oh my gosh, somebody opened this, we're not going to cover it. It's already broke, so we're not real worried about it. Not that that company even exists anymore. Back then these guys were out of Arizona. There's 4 torque screws on here, so we're going to pull those off and see what it looks like. take a look at the time capsule. And this is the height of technology back then. Multi-channel variable outputs with fully active crossovers. Oh, the fun we had. Look at the size of that power supply. It's just simply ginormous. I mean, it's really not that big. To give it some scale, here's a standard SD card. You guys all know how big that guy is. And there's the power supply. It's huge, right? This amplifier, as far as power went, 620 meant it's 6 channel by 20 watts. That's it. That's all this guy put out. Of course, that's at 4 ohms. And these were supposed to double their power when you got them down to 2 ohms. Conceivably, it would be 6 by 40. I had one of these, and I had the 420 version of it. And the reason I had the 420 version is because the sub channel on this sucked. What I did is I actually could have gotten away with having 2 420s, but I'd bought this first and it just didn't work for the subwoofers very well because of that volume problem. A friend of mine had a 420 to sell and he was like, hey man, do you want to trade me something for it? And I was like, of course. And I put a 420 on 2 Orion XTR8s in a bandpass enclosure, and I used this to power Morel 6.5s, mid-range and mid-bass. It worked great. And when looking at the input section here, we have these old school game pots that are really nice, but something I thought was fun to point out is you guys always talk about how RCAs are run through cars. Well, take a gander at how they ran this RCA through this amplifier. This is it here. And because of the way they want the wiring to go, it runs all the way through the amplifier, bypassing everything in this amplifier that makes noise and out to this end. But surprisingly, even though it's not the greatest RCA in the world that they used, these things didn't have noise. Sure, floor noise was always an issue on these older amplifiers. This still didn't have engine noise and all that fun stuff that you might associate with someone doing something stupid like this in an amplifier. What they do now is that they would, of course, they have smaller gain pots and the RCAs would be over on this side. We've all seen those style amplifiers. And I think there's more resistors in this than any amplifier I've ever looked at nowadays. Your MOSFETs are along the side here. As you can see, it's starting to fall apart as it would. I mean, the amplifier's 30 years old. There's no way we're gonna hook this thing up though because I don't wanna ruin the board. It's not worth it for me to do that. This is just a piece of history I thought you guys might be interested in seeing. Now, the one that I have is one of the original models because it has that older logo. This amplifier did make it into the transition from that old logo to the round, I guess, nicer looking logo. I personally like the old one myself, but it didn't stay around that long because the new Cobalt line had come out, better price points and more power. This just never was a big hit. The Cobalt line was becoming more popular. They had a 230, they had a couple other ones. I have scars on my arms because they had some of the sharpest heat sinks ever.
Do you ever burn yourself?
On the amplifiers?
Mm-hmm.
Not these.
They didn't get that high.
No, they didn't. I mean, they're not drawing crazy power. Like, you look at this amplifier and compare it to like a T1005. The T1005 is smaller than this amplifier and 1,000 watts. Technology has definitely moved a lot in that amount of time.
Yeah.
This is basically the size of like a 2,000 watt amplifier by today's standards. Definitely not the circuit board, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Alright guys, we hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane for me. You guys have a wonderful day as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.